show the Cowboys, John Hoover on Oklahoma.
So, as you know, I've been a proponent for a long time, since 2015, of not watching that show. Don't watch the CFP show until the end. Well, last night, I watched the Kansas-Michigan State game, and Kansas is so dang good. They're going to be really good. Ochai Agbaji is so much better than he was last year. But I went out to take the dog outside. Did not realize that after the Kansas game, they were going to wedge in the CFP show. And for the first time in 6 years, my eyes saw it.
Do you feel like dirty?
No, what happens is that you can't control it. When you watch it and you see something, and the first thing I saw was Michigan State and then Michigan above them. And I was like, what in the – why is the –
I know. Yeah, head-to-head matters only when they want it to be. Oregon in head-to-head with Ohio State, that game was in Columbus. But 2 weeks later, Michigan State's winning against Michigan because, as Gary Barta said from Iowa, well, Michigan is just a more complete football team. That's how they bring you in just to strike you with some Black Widow venom. Craig, did you even pay attention to much of it? I know you're kind of like me.
I mean, I paid attention, but it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, the team we cover is not in the mix, and they only dropped one spot after an embarrassing loss. So that tells you how legitimate this is. I mean, how does Baylor fall one spot after that showing versus TCU? How?
Because Brigham Young's right behind him, and head-to-head matters.
Yeah, and it's also because they play Oklahoma this weekend. And so, hey, we're not going to drop Baylor to like 20, and then OU's got to play number 20. And I know, like, they have their set. You know, Dave Bartu came on here last week, and he's talking about how they have their set of parameters, and it's really not that hard to figure out what they do. You know, they go by like a set of rules, basically. So it's not as though they're in there just riffing and freestyling on this thing. But, you know, it is comical when Baylor loses a horrific game. I mean, like, they had no business falling to TCU, and they did, and TCU deserves credit for that. But that was way more than a one-spot drop. That was like a 5 or 6 spot drop, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought they would be 18,
yeah,
kind of like where they are in the poll.
I thought they would be within the top 20 still because they were at, 12, but at the same time, I mean, just one, I don't know. That seems like they're setting the table for not only Oklahoma to not be too penalized, and that way they get to play a top 15 team still. And yes, BYU's right behind them, so you can't, with the head-to-head, really jump them. So, it's kind of a jam puzzle to have to figure out. But I was surprised by that, just them dropping one spot. The rest of it, kind of what you're referring to, kind of what was expected. Georgia, Bama, Oregon, Ohio State, that top 4, and then there's Cincy. They keep winning. Might not be the most impressive every time, but they're still there, and they're still a thorn in the side of that committee, that's for sure.
Think about this. Cincinnati almost blanked the bed twice in the last few seconds against Tulsa, but they won, and yet they moved up a spot, right? They moved up a spot. Let me ask you this, Paul. Ohio State, the thought about 9-0 Oklahoma is that they don't have a quality win, and I can see that. Right now it appears as if some of the games – teams, their main 3 best opponents are coming up because Texas has fallen off the board, but they have Baylor and obviously still Iowa State, Oklahoma State. Ohio State's best win is against Penn State, 33-24. But Gary Barta said Oklahoma doesn't have any quality wins. Is that a Penn State that now has dropped outside the top 20 or so? And they won by 9. It's considered a quality win. So that's the difference between 5 and 8. Is that game with Penn State when they struggled against a bad Nebraska team in Lincoln?
Here's what I wonder. I saw this, somebody theorized this. He thought, I can't remember what it was, he thought that they just straight up and down forgot about Penn State until they'd already submitted everything and then had to be like, Penn State, we still consider that quality. Yeah, I don't know. None of that makes sense. And Oklahoma's undefeated. Now, granted, have they not looked great all the time doing that? Yeah, but they're still undefeated, so I'm kind of confused as to why. Is Oklahoma their example for the year? Is that the one where, like, hey, listen, we're not just going to prop up every great team. We're going to make Oklahoma earn it.
I don't know, man. I don't want to pretend like I know what they're doing. You know what I mean? I'm not like – there's shows that are going to spend 2 hours on these rankings. And what's the point? Like, they are what they are, and I know we got to talk about it.
We're going to bring it up. This is the first 20 or 30 minutes of this show. We'll discuss it, take your calls on
No, I understand that. Yeah. Hey, for those who want to talk about it and those who have teams in the mix, absolutely. But if you're, like, looking to me today to, like, try and make sense of this, I have no answers for you. I have no idea how Oregon, and is viewed, and how that Stanford loss doesn't really seem to matter because the win that they had matters so much more than the loss that's now not a great loss at all, that was propped up to be an okay one, is not anymore. I don't know why Oklahoma unbeaten is behind 5 one-loss teams. Okay, you want to tell me they haven't played anybody? Okay, well then Baylor only drops 1 spot, so there's a golden opportunity for them this weekend, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to make sense of all this, and all I know really is that there's a big game this weekend and a bunch of other big games this weekend, for Oklahoma and the like, and there will be another weekend after and one more after that, and that will sort through. But in terms of, just the sort of up and down positioning of Pete, I don't know what they're doing. I really don't.
From the 440, we're going to read some text and chat, but we're going to take your calls, and that line is open right now, 254-339-1122 from the 440. The only rules the committee follows is whatever helps ESPN financially first. And Gary Bartu last week kind of nailed it on some of those things. Let me read some of what you have said. The committee for the playoff is contradicting themselves so many times from Scotty B. John, OU didn't even go over Michigan State when they lost to an unranked team. OSU's defense would work Cincinnati. That's from Blake. Let's see here. From Paula. From Biscuits and Gravy, the committee is manipulating the rankings to produce the desired results. John, Baylor deserves some credit for only having 2 losses. Mike S., Alabama barely survived 4-4 LSU, and they remain number 2. 5 one-loss teams ahead of unbeaten Oklahoma. Make it make sense.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
And then also, I saw this from one of our guests last night, and Gabe Eichert, who covers Oklahoma Big 12 today on Sirius XM. Lincoln Riley has done a lot in a short amount of time as a head coach at Oklahoma because of all the stuff going on yesterday with him not being around. But there's no doubt that Lincoln Riley being on the practice field this morning in Norman while he's also on a flight to Baton Rouge is the most remarkable accomplishment of his career. That is truly amazing.
Yeah, so I guess he showed up for that coach's show last night, huh? Yeah. Must have, with all that little to-do about him missing his press conference yesterday for whatever reason that was. But great. Lincoln Riley's going to be there on the sidelines against Baylor on Saturday. I don't think that's any surprise. And, obviously that's going to be a huge game for the Sooners. And I think just, pride factor, it's a big game for Baylor after their showing last week to get back at home and play well and to know, like, hey, you guys went from, 7-1 to possibility all of a sudden staring at, 3 losses just like that. And, that starts to affect your bowl positioning. And those are the types of things, the Big 12's out the door if you don't win this weekend, basically. So there's going to be a lot riding on that game for both squads. And I think for Oklahoma, it's pretty clear they got to stay perfect to have any shot at this college football playoff. And Oklahoma State, obviously, they remain in the mix a little bit, but that's going to come down to here in a couple weeks when they meet up in Bedlam. So Big 12's got a chance with a couple of teams, but only a couple of teams, and they're both going to have to go without any blemishes the rest of the way, it appears, to have much of a shot.
From Owen, West Virginia fan, who's in charge of the committee? Can they be fired? I mean, this is absolute madness and not in a good way. Why can't we just go off the AP poll? That's part of that. The college football standings, this is the way they're deciding who's in the semifinals. You can't fire them. Some can be recused. Is that right, Paul? Some can also maybe just not be a part of it. I think Archie Manning was a part of it at one point. And they rotate through some of the names. They do that. Let's see here. Notre Dame has better wins. This is from Return Trip. Notre Dame has better wins than Michigan and a better loss than Michigan. They lost to what right now is number 5 Cincinnati, and they also have the wins that Michigan doesn't have. You could kill yourself. I have found a way to just not watch it and then see the numbers when they come down and then also read some of the quotes from Gary Barta, who is the spokesperson.
I mean, that's the thing is, a lot of these teams, like Michigan doesn't have a top 25 win, I don't believe, right? And so Notre Dame, outside of that Cincy game, I don't believe they have a top 25 win. And that Cincy, team was top 10, and that's the only game they lost. And you can go over this all day of kind of where teams are positioned. I think I'm just sort of at the point where I just don't get it anymore. And so I just look at them, and they are what they are. And, as far as trying to make sense, I don't know where to begin with kind of their method. And, again, Dave Bartu said last week, there's not, it's not as though they get in the room and they're like, how can we screw around with this week? But it's what it seems like they do. I mean, it really it does feel like that's what they do, is they massage it to fit whatever storyline they want. But I think they just, they go in there and they have their set of rules. They go by them, and whether they make a lot of sense to us or not, which more often than not they don't, it is the system that is in place right now for college football.
Armstrong, throw up that